Hi, my name is Frank Straza with the Heritage School of Woodworking, and in this video I'm going to show you how to sharpen a plane. I highly recommend that you refer to our other videos on how to sharpen a chisel and how to choose a sharpening stone. We go over in depth the different types of stones. Essentially, a plane is a holder for a chisel. So if you can sharpen a chisel, you can sharpen a plane. There are, however, a few differences between the types of planes and how the blade is configured. Let me show you here. We've got a rabbet plane. This is a rabbet block plane. The blade extends all the way out to the edge. I'm going to sharpen this different than I would sharpen my smoothing plane. I have here a plane that I use as a scrub plane, and you can see the blade is very rounded as opposed to this one that is perfectly straight across. That's the biggest difference. The jointing plane here, I would sharpen it as well straight across. Let me show you a few of the different ways that you can sharpen the plane iron, the different configuration of the blades on the whiteboard. Okay, so you can sharpen your plane iron either perfectly straight like that, which is the way I would sharpen a rabbet block plane, where the blade extends all the way out to the edge. The problem with sharpening a smoothing plane like that is that the edge, right here, the ends, can dig into the work. So I typically sharpen my smoothing plane with a slight camber and even nicking off the edges, just taking the edges off like that. The edges on a smoothing plane there, the corners rather, are not of much use for me for a smoothing plane, and I don't want those corners to dig into the work when I'm working. The jointing plane here, I typically sharpen straight across like that. This scrub plane, I'm going to sharpen with a large camber, very convex shape like this. For this video, I'm going to show you how I sharpen a smoothing plane, which has this very slight camber, and then I take these corners off. Again, don't sharpen your rabbet plane like you would sharpen a smoothing plane. The rabbet plane is going to be sharpened just like you would sharpen a chisel. I'm taking apart the plane, and we discussed that in some other videos that we've done on plane restoration, tuning up a plane, using a plane. Please check those videos for that process. Right now we're going to focus on sharpening the plane iron. Again, we're going to have a very, very subtle camber with the corners nicked off right there, taken off. I'm going to start on the coarse diamond stone, putting a little bit of water to help float away the metal particles. And again, I highly recommend that you watch the chisel sharpening video, because we talk in depth about the importance of having the back perfectly flat. The same thing applies with a plane. But we're going to start here on the bevel. One thing I want to do is maintain a bevel of about 25 to 30 degrees. If I start creeping up too high on my angle, it can mess with my planing, and I'll explain that here in a minute. So I want to maintain about 25 to 30 degrees. Well, how do I know that that's the angle? Well, most planes come already ground to about 25 degrees. You can always check it with a protractor. Check your angle. Just take a protractor like this, put it on here, and check to see what the angle is. In this case, we are right about, we're sneaking up to 35 degrees. So I'm pushing the limit a little bit, but it should be fine. 35 degrees should be fine. Feel the angle, and we're going to start working the plane back and forth here, actually in a circular motion on the stone. Now, how do I get the cambered effect that I want? Well, the way I do that, and this is very, very subtle, what I do is I put a little bit of pressure right here. So the pressure is right here, and then I'm going to change the pressure over here. You can actually hear it slightly as I change the pressure. So I'm alternating pressure from this side of the iron to that side of the iron. And that's what does the camber. How do we know that we've gone enough? Well, when this surface meets this surface, we'll feel a burr on the back side. I don't feel a burr, so I want to keep working it until I feel that burr. One thing that can tell you a lot is the scratch pattern. If you view the scratch pattern, you can see if you're putting too much pressure on one side, even if you're at the right angle. A guide wouldn't really help you here, because with a guide, the main purpose of the guide is to keep it in line like this, other than rocking the guide. So really, the only way to effectively put a camber in your iron is freehand. It does take practice, though, to be able to put pressure, to be able to put that camber on evenly. So I'm going to start by just putting pressure here, then we're going to rock it over there. Hear the difference? Now we're going to rock it back, then back like this, working in a circular motion. The reason why I work in that circular motion is to maintain flatness on this bevel. Let's feel. Now we're starting to get a burr. Now I'm feeling that burr right there, right there, right there. The burr can also tell you how even your camber is. If you're starting out with an iron that's perfectly straight, you're of course going to get a bigger burr out here on the edges, because we're taking more off on those edges, and less of a burr right there in the middle. This iron is already cambered, so in this case I'm getting an even burr all the way across. Now I'm going to go over to the fine stone and very carefully take that burr off. As I mentioned, the back of this plane is already perfectly flat, so I don't have to worry about that. Again, refer to the video on restoring a chisel, an in-depth sharpening of a chisel, where we talk about the importance of having the back perfectly flat. Now let's go to the medium stone here, and we're going to work again following the same bevel, putting pressure right here, then alternating that pressure back over there. Back and forth. Very slight. Let's feel the burr. Okay, we've got a burr again. Let's take the burr off. Now we're going to come over here. Again, alternating that back and forth, just like this. I feel a little bit of a burr here, but not so much there, so let's just work it a little bit more. Now I've got a burr. Let's take that off. Let's now go to the oil stone. The oil stone, we want to be sure that we use oil, no water on this stone. This is a hard, translucent Arkansas stone. This is a natural quarried stone. It does not have a grit designation because it is a natural stone, but I would say if you were going to compare it to, say, a Japanese water stone, it would be comparable to 6,000 grit. I'm working the back here. Now we're going to work the bevel. Again, altering that pressure. It just takes practice, as most of these things do, but don't be afraid to try. And the burr can tell you a lot. You'll feel that burr. Much finer stone. There, now I've got a nice burr on there. Work it like that. No burr. And now I'm going to go to the strop, which is essentially just a piece of leather adhered to a block of wood, charged with some rouge. You don't have to put the rouge on every time you sharpen. I usually put it on once every week or a couple weeks. Let's just move this over, and with the strop, I only can pull the iron. I only can pull the iron. If I push the iron like this, then we're going to cut into the leather, which we don't want to do. So what I'm going to do is start by putting pressure here. So there's a lot of pressure there, and then work it. And as I work this, now the pressure is over here. So it's kind of like this. I'm working it along, pressure here, then even it in the middle, then pressure over here. So work it just like so, just a couple strokes. Doesn't take much. And you'll see there's a nice polish on there. And then we'll work the back of it, a few strokes. Doesn't take much. And then we'll test it. Let's just test it. I like to test it on my thumbnail. Feels nice and sharp. You can also test it on a piece of paper. And it should just cut right through just like that. One problem with sharpening the iron too steep like this, in other words, if I have too great an angle right here, the iron still could be sharp. It actually could be razor sharp. But if the angle is too steep, when you fit this in over the frog right here, this frog is bedded at 45 degrees. So if we have this angle greater than 45 degrees, it's going to hit on the bevel before it contacts the wood, and it will not cut. Let me show you on the whiteboard to help illustrate my point. Okay, so let's draw the angle of the plane, which is 45 degrees. So here's the surface that we're planing, or even the plane sole right there. We've got the angle of the plane, the frog angle of 45 degrees, the surface that we're planing, and let's add our blade in. So now let's put the blade in here. Now if I put an angle that's greater than 45 degrees, even if I rounded the iron accidentally like this, and I put that in like this, what's going to happen? It doesn't matter how sharp the iron is. The iron could be razor sharp. But if that angle is greater than 45 degrees, it's going to hit right there and it will not plane. A common problem there is when you're sharpening along, what happens is you tend to round that iron just slightly like this. Again, it may be razor sharp, may cut perfectly through a piece of paper or even like a chisel would. But if it's rounded like this, the angle is going to be greater. So if the angle is greater than 45 degrees, it just will not be able to plane the wood. That's why, as I showed earlier, I think 35 degrees is about the maximum. If it starts getting higher than 35 degrees, I would probably want to go back and grind it back a little bit, just to get it down. Okay, let's put this plane back together and we'll try it out. Okay, let's try it out. I think that's sharp. That's how you sharpen a smoothing plane. Please check out our other videos for more in-depth sharpening tips and techniques, and also our video on how to set up a plane and how to use a plane.